Hello, and welcome to the Pokemon Draft Challenger League, Season 2 Power Rankings for the Voltage Division. My name is Charles. I am been in the PDPL League for 2 seasons, and I'm also an admin. And today I am joined by Ryan, who played in PDPL Season 1 and is also an admin. If you want to say hello.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Ryan here. I know it's been a while.
And I am also joined today by none other than Joey, who I believe this is his second season doing PDCL.
Yep, that's correct. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. I'm happy to do this. It's fun.
All right, and happy to have you. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So the methodology for the rankings. So how we did this is we had the community submitted rankings, and we took all the numbers and we averaged the rank of each team, and we calculated it, determining the placements. And basically, this method is what I really like personally about this method is that it takes a lot of the subjectivity out of it and makes it a bit more objective, because you're not just like there's not just one person like saying their opinion and people get upset. It's community, and it's the most fair way to put it, in my opinion. So we also I kind of lied about this a bit in my original announcement. I said that there were not going to be any admins or any hosts joining this. So we had to change that because we weren't able to get everyone to get the rankings in. So we do have our opinions in here as well, and they are included in the averages. And we have individual notes and discussion that are based on the team that was drafted and not the coach. So the coach is just not in there. We don't consider the coach in the team at all. It's just based on the team hours. So basically it's the same player playing the team, which team is likely to win, I guess.
The individual coach play style did not factor in, is not going to factor into discussion. There's a lot of coaches that have unique play styles and know mons really well of a certain type of variety, and we're not considering that. We're doing the while we didn't actually rank these because they're averages, we are doing the standard, not counting any coach history, not any coach play style. None of those preferences are going to factor in our discussion of the teams. We're going to be looking at them from more an abstract perspective.
Right. And I guess just one more disclaimer is that this is just for fun. If your team ranks a little lower, it doesn't mean your team is bad. But, we just wanted to do this for fun. And, yeah. And maybe we can give you a few suggestions on how to make it better. Yeah. Do you guys want to add anything else before we go on?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I think that the point of this video is just to, like you said, have fun and see what the community thinks of everybody's team as a collective, and add our own thoughts and opinions on it just for fun purposes.
All right.
I have nothing else to add. Let's go ahead and get right into our first one.
All right. So number 14, we have Alex123, and I believe I will be starting this one. So to start off with the strengths of this team. So one thing I think that is very, very strong in this team is I really like the first 6 Pokemon on this team. As you can see in the bottom. So the Fluttermane, the Iron Bundle, the Kingambit, Gallade, Crocodile, and the Vivillon. I really like those 6 on this team. I think they're very good. I think they have, they synergize together. And I think that that combo together is going to be very effective. I would say one of the weaknesses is honestly kind of the other half. They do have strength, and there's some synergy. For example, a Colossal is really good here for switching to things like Fairy moves, so things like that. But overall, those last 5 Pokemon need a lot of help to get going, and there's not a lot that can be done to help them. You have to I guess you kind of have to commit quite a few resources to make them work. And I just don't know if the front 6, as good as they are together, I don't know if they're going to help these ones. these bottom five do super well. Um, yeah, I mean that's basically all I can say about this about in terms of strengths and weaknesses. I will guess I'll just pass it on to you guys. If you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually already given some thoughts in the Voltage General channel directly to Alex. He actually asked what, how we liked his team, and so I just took the opportunity to give him some direct feedback about it. And you basically said what I said. The top half of this team is pretty solid. It doesn't look to have any glaring problems, as far as I can tell. But the bottom five, in my opinion, they seem to be more, um, like you said, they need more resources to get going, and also each one is a little bit redundant. They're all slow, bulky mons. They basically do the same thing just with different typings, and different like coverage. So that's that's really all I had to say about it. I do have some ideas about how this team could be improved, but I don't know. Do you have anything to add there, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think too that within the top core, you have a lot of like good niches and things covered. But those like bottom six Pokemon, in my opinion at least, are mostly more Trick Room oriented Pokemon.
Yeah.
Appleton, Colossal, Bellybolt. Those mons don't necessarily need a Trick Room to function optimally. But if I'm not mistaken, I think the only Trick Room setter on the team is Gallade,
Yeah.
which is not a Pokemon you want to be clicking Trick Room on. You want to be clicking sharpness boosted nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of a core element, is that the team has six Pokemon that you really prep hard for, and then some ones that you maybe consider in prep if it's good into you, and that's not. And you kind of want, especially when a community is looking at a team, right? Because these are community rankings. The community is going to look at your team from top to bottom. So teams that lose cohesion as they go are going to be teams that will generally rank lower, because people are looking at a whole team rather than just, oh, look at the synergies with like the top three tier ones. That kind of thing isn't really what's going to be on people's minds. So I think that something to assist the cohesion with the tier 3 Pokemon would be good. As you said, they all kind of have a similar role, so I think you can actually swap one of them out for something that either helps your faster mode go even faster, because you do have some kind of more mid-speed mons in that fast mode that outside of Icy Wind drops could definitely use a little bit more speed support. You could also grab like a really good Trick Room mon in tier 3 as well. Like something like that would definitely, I think, help this team out a lot. But you definitely don't have to. I always recommend playing with a team and seeing how it feels first.
Oh, just to add, Fluttermane actually gets Trick Room as well. But
It does get Trick Room.
You don't want really to click
Not
Trick
a
Room
mon you're clicking. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it only had Specs Moonblast. I forgot it had other moves. Or
Pretty
Pixie
much.
Plate Moonblast if you can run Protect.
Yeah, and perhaps one more potential transaction idea is I think this team could really benefit from something that could click Fake Out, because with these there are these Pokemon like Fluttermane and Gallade that can set Trick Room, but they can't do it safely, and having a Fake Out option would let them do it much easier. But that's all I got for this team, and
That's only if you want to play with TR too. But Fake Out's generally good to grab if you can find a good Fake Out user. That's always nice.
right. All right, and if that's all we got, I think let's move on to the next slide. All right, and Joey, if you would like to start.
Yeah, so this is Radial's team. It's ranked 13th. We've got Regieleki, Moltres Galar, Cresselia, Magnezone, Quaquaval, Toadscruel, Morgrim, Mismagius, Ursaring, Flapple, and Flareon. And I'm actually pretty surprised to see this team ranked this low. I feel like this team is really interesting and has a lot of tools available to it. With just to start with the strengths here, Regieleki is fast. There's nothing else that outspeeds it really, and I mean obviously you can still do booster energy stuff to make your bundle outspeed it and Fluttermane and all that, but at a base speed, it's just so dominant. And what we see here with that is you've got really, really high speeds that has just absolutely dominant speed control options, with solid trick room options as well. Like Cresselia is just an absolutely wonderful trick room setter and support in general, even outside of trick room, of course. Where I think that this team sort of falls apart is it just doesn't have enough within those two modes, those two speed tiers, to use them as effectively as other teams would be able to use them. So I don't know. I think that like Moltres Galar here, having the speed control next to it with like Regieleki would definitely let it shine, but I don't see where it's going to get a lot of backup from that. Like Quaquaval here, what's it really going to do to help support the Moltres Galar in this situation? Similarly, in the Trick Room mode, Ursaring is kind of lackluster as a Trick Room Mon. I drafted it before, and its base speed is just a little bit too high to really function well in Trick Room, and most of the time you just want to do Flame Orb Guts. So you can't run like an Iron Ball or a Room Service or anything like that to drop the speed and do shenanigans. So yeah, I guess that's really my thoughts on this team. Is mostly just I think that it has a lot of potential because of the two extreme ends of how well it can support each speed tier mode, but the Pokemon that fit within those modes could be expressed better with more synergistic speeds and complementary typings. I think would be better as well for those two modes.
Yeah,
That's about all I have on that for now.
Yeah. I generally kind of agree with your assessment of the team. I do want to say though, there's some really nice, like, in terms of like value picks, I feel like this team did a nice job. I think Toedscruel's a pretty solid, support tier 2 with the Spore and Rage Powder, that kind of stuff. I think it can work pretty well. I think Morgrum's probably one of the best Mons in tier 3 on this list. And it's just such an incredibly good support Pokemon. Miss Magius, I think, is a really solid tier 3 attacker. Ursaring, while I could definitely see its speed tier being a little high for Trick Room, I think that if it wasn't one of the only Pokemon that was operating in Trick Room, I think it would be really, really good. Right?
Yeah.
And I think too, something that might have influenced community rankings is I've noticed people are very split on Moltres Galar right now, like just as a draft community. People really aren't sure what to think of it compared to last gen, where it was pretty dominant, but people aren't really sure how the lack of Dynamax is going to kind of affect it, I think. So that also definitely could have played into the rankings, because I do think this team overall is pretty solid. But it definitely does have a couple issues. I do want to compliment too. I do think Cresselia is a bit of a sleeper solely for, I believe it's one of the only Pokemon that still gets Ally Switch. And it is. And it Ally Switches really well with a lot of Pokemon on this team, like defensively with the Levitate. So I do think there's some really fun shenanigans there. Overall, though, solid team, I think. Maybe reconsider a couple things in like that tier 2 area, and I think you're looking like you're in good shape. And solid tier 4s, by the way. Flareon and Flapple are both decent picks.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I want to jump in and add something else that I remember thinking about this team too, is that I think that honestly, it would benefit a lot from. I don't know. I really want to see something in this team that has more effective use of the Trick Room mode, because I feel like it could be very powerful. It just needs one more Pokemon, like, I don't know, Caparaja or something, to just underspeed a lot of other things and really utilize that kit. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, I guess I'll adds things. Although I honestly I don't have much to add. I think you guys are saying it very well. I guess yeah, to like really just I think the speed tier here is just the big thing. I mean, I think if you can get some things that are mm, maybe just like a bit because like there's obviously there's a lot of Pokemon between like in like the 70s range and there's a lot of Pokemon in like the 60s range, which is like it's kind of a rough area for whichever way you're going. So I think if you can like definitely like expand it to fill it out, you get some like hundreds, you get some like 90s, 80s, whatever, and just fill it down. I think it'll be great. And I will say there is a few areas, like for example, Regieleki Magnezone, where a lot of their roles are kind of a bit compressing. I mean, obviously, one's a bit different. One's a bit like I have different speed tiers. I mean, obviously, there's a steel typing too, but I feel like you could get more value out of maybe something else in that Magnezone slot if you wanted to go. For if I'm just like thinking about like a potential transaction idea, like I don't know what's still remaining that could be like a replacement for it, but yeah, that's all I got. Yeah, and if that's all, I guess let's move on to number 12.
Yep.
Okay, and take it away, Ryan.
Opens with me. So this team we've got here, Ronan, I believe, is correct for the name. Hopefully, I got that right. We've got Sneasler, Palafin, Spectrier, Arcanine Hisui, Torn T, Regidrago, Hisui and Electrode, Girafarig, Dugtrio, Wigglytuff, Pawniard. I actually do quite like this team overall. I think it's got a lot of pretty like cool mons that are working together in kind of unusual ways. I especially really like the Torn T Regidrago in tier 2. I think that's just going to be really solid. Arcanine Hisui has looked like a Pokemon too that's going to benefit a lot from Tailwind support. So I generally think that tier 2, like just overall, like rock solid on that. That is excellent grouping of Pokemon that I think offer a lot of utility and a lot of power for the team. And then I go to tier 3 and I have kind of similar thoughts. I think Electrode Hisui is actually going to end up being a really, really solid Pokemon. That speed tier is really great. I think that the grass electric typing is surprisingly useful. It's got a solid move pool. Girafarig with Eviolite can get pretty bulky. I also like it as like a Sapsiver pivot for Palafin as well. I think that can be really, really good on a team like this. And I like the Wigglytuff simply for having competitive, for getting some value out of that tier 4, having competitive for a team with a lot of really strong physical attackers like that Palafin, Sneasler, Arcanine, can work out. Wigglytuff is kind of an underwhelming Pokemon most of the time, but I like the idea of it, and it's a good way to get value. I think my main thing with this team is Sneasler and Spectrier are both pretty frail tier 1s. And I think that, and then you have Palafin, which while being very bulky, Palafin needs that turn to pivot. I think my main concern with this team as a whole is what are you pivoting into? Like, because so if you need to switch Sneasler or Spectrier or Palafin out, all of your tier 1s that might end up in a bad lead position, what are you going to do to get them in a better lead position? How are you going to navigate your Pokemon? Because there's not Arcanine Hisui, while good, shares some weaknesses with Sneasler, so that one feels a little risky, the ground weakness, and what do you switch the Spectrier into? And what are you outside of that Girafarig and that Electrode? I don't super know what the like good safe Palafin switch is, and that's kind of my thing with this team. Is it's just like I think it's like really good. And I think the tier 1s in isolation are really good. I just really struggle with how are you going to actually use these in battle? Like, how are they going to operate in a group of 4 Pokemon? And I think that would be the biggest thing I'd look for, is just if you can get a really good pivot piece for that Palafin, Sneasler, Spectrier, like something that is just a thick Pokemon that you can bring in. Like, that's what a Moongus traditionally does in VGC. Something like that, with that kind of role would be good. I don't know what Pokemon specifically, but that's kind of my big thought on it. Overall, though, I do quite like this team. I do think some kind of Trick Room mode would be good as well, which also might be something a lot of folks noticed. But overall, I think you have the bulk and a couple of Pokemon, though, to kind of outlast one if one does come up. but I do think that you don't have enough counterplay into some of the teams that ranked higher that have good TR modes. Overall, though, I think it's a solid team. Anyone want to add on to that?
Sure. Yeah, I guess just to echo a bit. I really like the synergy, like just like type synergy of this team. So like for example, like I really like the I actually really like the Palafin and the Arcanine working together here because you got like a strong grass type coming in. You want to hit the Palafin with the grass type. You got that safe. I mean, relatively safe switch into the Arcanine with the Intimidate. I guess it really depends, but because it is a neutral hit. But yeah, I think this team, it's very. I mean, Ryan, you covered it quite a bit here. It's very lead oriented. I think if you get the lead right with this team, like you're in a great spot. And I think that's where Palafin kind of struggles to fit in a bit. Is that Palafin kind of like you're kind of really neutering a lead in order to get it going. Once it gets going, it's very good. But like on a team like this, where like you have so much like strong lead potential, like I feel like Palafin might slow it down. Not to say Palafin will be bad here, but yeah, that's just my general thought.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I actually something that came up in my head as Ryan was talking was just that it feels like half of the team, maybe more than half, wants to really go hyper offense and blitz the opponent, while the other portion of the team wants to take its time and set up more effectively. And I do agree that is largely a result of Palafin on this team, but I also think that it comes from the Giraffe Rig pick as well as even the Tornadus here, because while Tornadus is absolutely solid, it's not Tornadus incarnate, right? And doing like the prankster tailwind stuff, you're going to be at a disadvantage. From what I see here, this team is going to be at a disadvantage if it loses the speed war. Yeah, as soon as it wins the speed war, you're done. Like, the enemy's going to be blitzed, and there's nothing you're going to really be able to do without some really skillful play. But if it loses the speed war, it's kind of the opposite for you. That's what I see in this team.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, also the 4 times weaknesses on some of these things is a little bit rough. I do think that there's a lot of overlapping weaknesses on this, and then there are too many 4 times weakness on this.
Terra can't fix everything regarding those kind of problems, unfortunately. It definitely helps a lot this gen, but I don't think it fully fixes that kind of a thing. I do think overall, though, like your sheer like output potential is very high, one of the highest in the division. So there's definitely, with good play, I think you can do it. I think next up we have Charles, who's going to be talking about our next team.
Yes, I'll be starting with Burayasha here.
Yep.
So we got tier 1, and we have Roaring Moon, Heatran, Grimmsnarl. Tier 2, Slowking, Mudsdale, Palmont. Tier 3, Bramblegast, Glaceon, Squawkabilly. And then Spupa, Bombardier. So the first thing I want to highlight about this team is the tier 1s. The tier 1s here are incredible. I think they work very, very well together. I mean, you got 2 big fairy weaknesses, but you have Heatran. And, just things like that. And also, just a lot of support, like good offense. The Pokemon can flex, like Roaring Moon can be support and can be offense. And it's just very good. And I also really, really like the fact that this team, I like its Trick Room option a lot. I think Mudsdale is probably one of the best Trick Room sweepers for its value in the game, or in this format. Just based on like value of it. And, you also have that Chilling Reception to combo with the Glaceon, which is very, very cool. And, yeah, those are just some of the big, big things I really like about the team. And I guess probably, like, honestly, really my biggest gripe with the team is like, so I look at some of these bottom picks. And specifically, I look at Squawkabilly and I look at Bombardier. Both these Pokemon, they're good. They both set Tailwind, but they're kind of compressed and run essentially the same role. And I feel like, so like in that regard, like it's not like bad. It's not neutering your team. Like, the team's still really good in my opinion. But there's more value to be gained from dropping one of those and like getting something else to function in that role. And honestly, that's kind of my biggest thing with this. I mean, obviously, the Roaring Moon can set Tailwind too, but like a lot of times you want to go Boonga Boonga damage with that Pokemon to get its best value. But yeah, I think this team's really solid. I think there's just a little bit of overlap, and yeah, I'll let you guys take over.
Well, I actually think that this team does. I think it does the offensive portion very, very well. I think it has a lot of high offensive power in both Trick Room and Tailwind options, as well as just foregoing Tailwind entirely, which because Roaring Moon can go really fast, and there are not a lot of things that are going to outspeed it with the booster energy set to speed. But like you're pointing out, there are a lot of Tailwind setters on this team when there doesn't really need to be. I feel like it would get a lot of improvement and a lot of value out of dropping to Squawkabilly. Even though I love Squawkabilly personally, I think it's definitely a sleeper pick. It's got a lot of really interesting options, and I'm actually using it in UDL right now. But it's very interesting to me that this team has so many Tailwind options. I definitely think that you could drop that. One thing that you didn't touch on, though, is that the Revival Blessing option is on this team. Since, only Repska and Palmot get that in the format, it's like, it's definitely a piece that should come into play with this team at some point. And I think will offer a lot of value. Having access to Revival Blessing, just even in prep, can be really tricky for your opponents. So that's definitely a strong point for this team, I think. And then finally, I think that Glaceon actually doesn't offer a whole lot to this team other than just having ice coverage.
Nah. I'll disagree with you there, but that's okay.
That's fine. I just think that swapping it for Jolteon would be better for this team's speed control overall, because it would allow you to get your faster mons, well, the slower mons in the fast mode, in a more advantageous position easier, in my opinion. Why do you disagree with that, Ryan?
I think Glaceon's just good on this team. I think it covers a lot of the things the team struggles to hit from some of the top offensive Pokemon, and I think that's going to be really, really nice for it. And I think Glaceon, too. Glaceon and Slowking can work really well together because Slowking gets chili reception. So you can also get like insane blizzards off because Glaceon's special attack is so good. And it is actually a good mon in of itself in Trick Room. So I definitely do think that Glaceon has 100% a role on this team in the TR mode. I think the TR mode for this team is loosely like Glaceon, Slowking, Mudsdale, and I actually really dig it. I think it's really, really solid. Yeah, I actually really quite like this team overall. I think it's got a good Firewater Grass, good Dragon Fairy Steel, obviously all that stuff. I think that there's a lot of good pivot options on this team. I think that maybe realistically every Pokemon can come. I don't concern myself. I'm not as concerned about the multiple Tailwind setters as much, I feel. Part of it, too, is because I didn't watch this draft, but I think there's like a non-zero chance that you get to tier 4 and it's like, well, Bombardier's a Pokemon I can use when I don't want to use Squawkabilly. Like I could see that being something that came up, might as well just grab it. I think the Grimmsnarl here just offers so much for the team, too. This team looks really nasty with screen support. I think Thunderwave speed control is also really good for a couple of the mons on the team. Overall, I do think that it does lean a little physical in some respects. A lot of the Pokemon, not all the Pokemon here are physical, obviously, but I do think that, to me at least, like some of your big hitters are really that like Roaring Moon, Mudsdale, Palmont, and I think even Bramblegast is usually a physical attacker, right?
Yes.
So like you've got a lot of physical offense. Slowking, while it can do some good special output because it's got a great special attack stat, lost Scald, which definitely does hurt a little bit. So you're more relying on Psychic Stab, which is a lot more easily switched into resisted. Heatran's obviously a fantastic special attacker, and so is Glaceon, but I do feel like that does limit slightly. But overall, though, I actually really like this team. I think I rated it quite a bit higher than this when I did my own personal PRs. I think that this will do pretty well for you.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with that.
Yes.
Moving on?
Yes, moving on.
All right. I'll start with this one here. So we've got M-Boss here. I almost said Memboss. M-Boss. We've got Annihilate, Tinglu, Gyarados, Corviknight, Raichu, Overquill, Sneasel, Delphox, Gogoat, Hypno, and Skiploom. And right off the bat, I just have to say that I'm hyped to see Overquill on this team. I really like Overquill, and it's one that I'm most interested in with the new format, and I think that it has a lot of potential. However, I'm not super sure how much it'll contribute to this particular team. And kind of overall, that sort of is the story with this team for me. Each Pokemon is interesting in and of itself, and it offers a good toolkit, but nothing really stands out to me as working particularly well together. Like, its synergy just feels neutral overall, not negative. It's just kind of neutral. There are some exceptions, of course, like the Raichu Gyarados, or the Annihilate and the Tinglu. Those pairs will go very nicely together. But I think that as a whole, there's not a lot of synergy, positive synergy anyway. It's just sort of neutral, and nothing is going to step on each other's toes or be negatively impactful. But you could have gotten more value out of the picks from a synergistic perspective. And I mean, part of that just comes from Annihilate. Annihilate is always a strong choice, and having it with the Tinglu and the Gyarados can definitely make both the special and physical sides of things with Intimidate and then Vessel of Ruin. Those things can be less of a threat to Annihilate and just let it continue to set up if you wanted to go for the bulk up route, or you've got a lot of fake out options here with this team as well. So I feel like there's a lot that can support the Annihilate, but the rest of it doesn't synergize super well from what I can see anyway. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, guys, when you contribute. But the one thing that I do want to say is like a major weakness for this team, though, is I feel like Fairy is going to be really strong into this team. There's not a lot of Fairy types in this format in general, but having Terra as an option really makes it dangerous. I feel like this team is going to struggle a little bit with fairies, especially because Overquill is kind of the only answer it has to them, other than Terra. And
Corv.
What's that?
Corv beats most fairies.
Yes, it's just I always feel like Corviknight. I don't know. Maybe you can talk more about that, but I feel like Corviknight is not as good in this generation, in this format, as it was in like Dynamax.
That's an insane take, but we'll get to that, I guess, later.
Yeah, I mean that's mostly what I think about this. I do think that this team would have been improved with a different pick than Gyarados. Personally, I think that adding like Amoonguss, for example, could have been useful for some redirection options. But I mean, Gyarados isn't bad by any means. I just think that more value could have been gotten out of that particular pick. Even like Gyapdos, that would have been cool from what I can see. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe the Corviknight helps out with the Overquill here more than I'm expecting. But I feel like getting like even Grafaiai in there or Glamora would be just better for helping with the coverage of the fairy types. But that's all I have to say about this one.
I'll get talking. I do think this team fundamentally plays a different pace than the other teams we've had so far, and actually a pretty different pace overall. This team is playing a bit of a, not necessarily like, it's playing a longer game, I think. There's not a lot on this team that like I feel like Mboss can lead it. Like, let's go back to Ronan's team, for example. Like, Ronan can just lead like Torn T, Reggie, Drago, Set, Tailwind, Dragon Energy, Burr, like it's very like Burr HO. This is like kind of almost the exact opposite. This is like a very like deliberate sort of play style, getting the good Intimidate pivots off, building the Rage Fist on the Annihilate while other mons just can't kill it, while it's setting up the bulk ups and while it's doing whatever it's supposed to do. The Corviknight can sit there and click Iron Defense and just win the game if your only way to hit it is electric moves. It can just Terra and, oh no, now it's at +6 defense and I'm going to get body pressed to death. That's really what this team is about, in my opinion, is I think it's kind of a very, like, oriented towards playing this really, like, solid, like consistent mid-ground setup sort of team, is how I kind of envision it. I could be wrong on that, but that's kind of how I see this team playing. I see it playing a lot like, those Regulation 9 like Talents teams that, in terms of like overall structure, is that it feels very structured and inspired by that sort of play. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the tier 3 picks on this team are good. I think the Sneasel, Delphox, Gogoat do add a lot. I think each Pokemon there has like a pretty solid role. Delphox has like Imprison Trick Room, and it's got overall like a really good move pool. It also gives you some nice immediacy, which I like on this team, having something a little bit more immediate. I think Gogoat is a solid pivot option and pretty decent value. Sneasel obviously gives you fast fake out and stuff like that. That's really good. Hypno is a Trick Room setter primarily when it's used, and I don't think that's a bad thing for this team to have at all, because Delphox isn't really a TR setter. It's more like, I don't want TR set if you're going to use it that way, but it's more so just an offensive mon. And Skiploom's your redirection, and with Eviolite, I guess Skiploom gets bulky. I see a lot of people drafting Skiploom this gen, and I'm not sure what's up with it yet, because I haven't played enough games in this format, but I'm noticing Skiploom's pretty popular among a lot of drafters right now. So I do think it's a lot of role compression in one mon, but I am curious to see how like actually effective it is. I think this team's overall pretty good, though. I think that I really want to wait and see on this team. I think that maybe the community ranked it a little lower because they weren't sure, because this isn't like as immediately obviously good as teams that maybe have a more traditional structure. But I do think this team has a lot of potential, so I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I'll just add a quick note here. So kind of going off what you're saying with very setup heavy, very setup oriented thing. I like to think of this team, especially with Annihilate being such a core member, as more of a protect the king sort of thing.
Yeah.
And with these protect the king teams, the king's out, you get the king to win by getting it to take as little damage as possible. In a way. And this does have things like Tinglu. It does have things like Gyarados, that can lower the damage taken. But beyond that, there's not a lot to stop damage, like a high amount of damage from going into something like the Annihilate here. And so, but like if there is a situation where like you're just taking hits for days, like you just win. But like if there is that Unga Bunga lead, that Reggie Drago coming in, like there could be some issues if you're not well prepared for it, if you're not well equipped to reduce the damage that thing can deal. But other than that, I think it's a solid team, and I'm pretty excited to see what this thing can do.
Is Sneasel the beat up mon, by the way?
Does
it
Yeah.
So Sneasel's the beat up mon. Actually pretty good too, because it's inner focus, so you can't fake it out, and it's got base 115 speed. So that does give it a lot of Unga Bunga as a lead, at least. So that's nice to see.
Right.
Yeah, the problem that I have with that is still just like what I said before, is like the fairy type, Fairy is really, really good into this team. And
Annihilate's essentially a fire type, it's fine.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Alright, so let's move on to And Ryan, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, so this is Dunnikin's team. I actually think this is a very cool team overall. I like the vibe. This team has energy, and I'm into it. So tier 1, we got Walking Wake, Iron Treads, Volcarona. Tier 2, Klefki, Arboliva, Sandy Shocks. Tier 3, Espathra, Dreadnought, Halucha. And then Tier 4, Oricorio, Electric, and Bayonet. So how this team, at least how I kind of saw it, the first thing I saw is that this is kind of a manual weather team, right? It's all about like getting the Klefki to click sunny day or rain dance, right? Like that's what this team kind of facilitates a lot of the time in terms of its weather mode. Walking Wake, Volcarona, mons like that. I mean, they just love being in the sun. And I think that that's really cool. But then Walking Wake's also good in the rain. You have this Dreadnought that can go really fast in rain and do a ton of output. Obviously, people have seen Sandy Shock's Espathra on ladder. Very good. I think Espathra is also a little underrated in terms of how nicely Lumina Crash compare with the Walking Wake and the Arboliva and the Sandy Shocks and the Volcar. Like, just in terms of, like, doing a damaging move that also gets that -2 SpDef and on a Pokemon with speed boost. I mean, that all adds up in a really nice, big way. I think Hawlucha on this team is just a solid, like, fast Pokemon. It's kind of just a fast attacker. You can run it with Grassy Seed and Burden with Arboliva, but that feels a little weird to set up, like a little gimmicky. I think that just Lucha in of its own merit will probably be fine. Oricorio and Bayonet. Bayonet is a solid kind of slow Pokemon. I believe it got Trick Room this gen. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
I got Trick Room this gen. It's a Frisk Pokemon, which is useful, base 115 attack. So it does help out a little bit with the slower end of the team, especially because that is actually, and Klefki's also a Trick Room setter, but you probably don't always want to slot Trick Room on Klefki, especially on a team like this with the dual weather. So I could see Bayonet kind of coming for that purpose. My main thing with this team is that in terms of criticisms or things that I would change, Iron Treads feels a little weird here. I think Great Tusk is picked by another coach, but like Great Tusk just makes way more sense to me. Is that just me on this team? Like, I just think that like the steel typing here doesn't help you a lot. And I think that you'll want to run your booster on other Pokemon more so. Like the Sandy Shocks, and the Walking Wake and whatever. And I think those are going to want your booster more often, so the Treads feels a little bit harder for me. I do think it can work in a lot of contexts on this team, to be clear, but I do think that one's it feels a little off. I also think there's a lot of type overlap on this team, which that is kind of part of the territory with a team like this. But I do feel like there is definitely some room to exploit that from opponents that are prepping really well. In where I think that some of this type overlap and some of the overlapped weaknesses, I think, can definitely be exploited. I do like the Iron Treads Walking Wake defensive synergy, though. I will comment that real quick, just kind of as an aside. Overall, though, I really like this team. I think it's got just a ton of like big potential. It's got a lot of like known factors and elements. But I think that even though a lot of those things are well known, I don't think that means they're easy to stop. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing really quick, Charles. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I really see an opportunity here for Chi-Yu to fit on this team nicely because yes, there is already a fire type with the Volcarona, but I don't think it can be understated how powerful Chi-Yu plus Espathra plus Walking Wake would be.
Yeah, that would be kind of nuts.
And Sandy Shocks, I mean, I feel like just going full special on this with the Chi-Yu and the Espathra will work because I've done it. So I really think that Chi-Yu being on the board right now and Iron Treads not offering a whole lot of value would be an excellent, excellent swap. Just that's all I really have to add.
Yeah. In terms of criticism, I honestly have nothing more to add. I think you actually hit it pretty much nail on the head. But like, I think my favorite thing about this team is absolutely the Klefki, though, because okay, I put my finger over the Klefki name, and I look at everything there. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. And then like, I lift my finger and I see Klefki, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. It's just. This Pokemon is so good at enabling, and I'm very excited to see it used on teams, and I love this Pokemon. I just think it works really well on this team, and I really like it a lot. That's all I'm going to add. But yeah. Shall I move on?
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. All right, so...
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah. Okay, moving on though to spooks, and I will go ahead and start this one. And we have Iron Valiant, Hydreigon, Ursaluna, Scizor, Rotom Heat, Slowbro, Salazzle, Stonejourner, Articuno, and then Toadpool, Psyduck. So okay, to start off with some things I like about this team. This team has I mean, you could draft you look at some of the big standard things in draft. Like let's start with something like a fairy fantasy core, fairy dragon steel. I think this has very strong one of those, and I think those Pokemon in those are very good. And then also another very popular thing in just Pokemon in general, Disquake. You got the Ursaluna and you got the Rotom Heat, and that's really freaking good. And yeah, this team also just offers really good Trick Room option with Slowbro. I think Slowbro is a great setter. I mean, there's really not much to explain as to why. It has good Fake Out and Salazzle. Stonejourner Power Spot is just really, really cool, and that also just sounds really, really funny with the Ursaluna. And on top of that, there's also just a lot that can enable Ursaluna. I really like that there's 2 levitators and a flying type, so you can just spam Earthquake when you're next to it. And I think that's very cool about it. And then for Toadstool Psyduck, I mean, they're cool. Toadstool's really cool for redirection. I'm not really 100% sure what Psyduck's going to offer to the team, but I'm excited to find out. And yeah, I think I really like this team. I think I rated this team pretty high. And yeah, I don't really know what I can offer for criticism right now, so I'll pass it on to one of you guys.
I can go with that. Sick. I get to be the mean guy in this PR. I'm excited. I get to be so mean to everybody. Ugh. Actually, I do like this team though. I think one thing I actually really like about it is Stonejourner Valiant looks kind of good, just because Valiant can sometimes miss calcs depending on how you spec it. So I think that's going to be really, really nice for it. I think one thing with the Ursaluna, now that you mention it, I actually do sort of worry about because this is a mon we haven't seen a lot in draft yet. One thing I am really curious about seeing how this team handles it is and it's something that a lot of VGC players are talking about, is the turn of setup for it, the turn where you protect and you let your guts fire flame orb activate. Now obviously it has a high enough base attack, it doesn't really need to do that, but most Ursalunas are going to do something like that. But then you kind of leave yourself open to techs like Charm, and in draft that's kind of a big deal. And so part of me is wondering though, because there's not a fast Tailwind option. Obviously, Ursaluna is typically more of slow Pokemon. Hydreigon's kind of your fastest option. I'm very genuinely curious to see how often the Ursaluna gets shut down by opposing prep. Because I feel because if you run it Clear Amulet, that's cool, I guess. But then it's you're not getting the damage from the guts, right? And those kind of questions really kind of ring for me with this particular mon. In terms of, I'm just not 100% sure how the actual turn to turn for this team looks. In a way, I'm just not sure what your turn to turn plays look like. In a way that a lot of other teams I do on this tier list will work. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that could be a really cool and a good thing, and I could learn about a whole new kind of thing here. But it is interesting. I think that the turn to turn for this team can be kind of intriguing, and I think that some of the that lack of a fast tailwind for some of these mons means that there are certain Pokemon that are going to kind of have to do certain things in the lead initially in order for the plan to go off. So that's my thoughts. I don't think that was criticism. I think that was just rambling, but that's okay. Joey, what do you got?
Well, I actually think that the thing that I like the most about this team is that it has so many potent options. Iron Valiant is just such a solid draft Mon. It has so many different things that you can do with it. Same with Hydreigon. Like on this team, it feels like everything could fit a variety of roles rather effectively, week to week, which I think is going to really benefit this team because, like you're saying, shutting down the Ursaluna could really be a problem for the team unless you've got a creative solution that this team offers throughout, all of its different possibilities. So I really think that that's a strength of this team is that it does have just so much variety and so much versatility in general. However, it is kind of tempered by a lot of overlapping weaknesses on this. I don't like seeing a lot of 4x weaknesses. Just I feel like this team doesn't have the speed to in either mode. If you wanted to go Tailwind or Trick Room or whatever, I don't feel like it has the speed to take 4x hits nicely without it being catastrophic. And I also just think like Articuno, I don't know, maybe I have a thing against ice types or something, but Articuno just doesn't seem like it's offering very much here to this team. It feels like there's a lot of overlap with what Hydreigon wants to do, so I don't really see it bringing a lot of value. And I think something like Haunter could actually benefit this team a lot more because it would be a faster Icy Wind option. You get Will-O-Wisp, I don't know. That's really all I have to add on this. I just think that a couple transactions could maybe make this team really, really shine.
Yeah, you guys are actually kind of reminding me of a few things I would like to add myself. One thing is, I am noticing like right now this team it doesn't really have the greatest way to hit water types. I mean, you got the Rotom, but it's weak to water, and I do think that's actually a pretty good value point for the Articuno there because it does get freeze dry, I believe.
Yeah, it does.
It does great.
My favorite move.
But like, yeah, that also goes into another point that Joey made, and I really liked it, is that while like there are some weaknesses for this team, like I do think there's a lot of creativity to be done with this team, and I think I'm not gonna like say any more like what I'm thinking because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, I think there's a lot of creative options, and I'm really excited to see them. Yeah.
Same.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
And hello, this is me, I think.
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. I helped Rolo draft this a little bit. So this is Rolo's team. So we've got Iron Hands, Torkoal, Dragonite, Bronzong, Sableye, Gastrodon, Florges, Lilligant, Persian, Cacturne, Jigglypuff. So one thing I do like about this team, just off the bat, is that I do feel like all the Mons can be utilized on it pretty effectively. There's like Jigglypuff has Friend Guard, Cacturne's really good in the sun because it's annoying. I'm thinking correctly there, I hope, but I will confirm that. Yeah, Cacturne has some sun stuff, I believe. A few things, but I do think that like at least the low tiers are fine. Florges, Lilligant, Persian. I mean, obviously Lilligant, Torkoal, Iron Torkoal, apparently. Lilligant, Iron Torkoal, my favorite Pokemon. Torkoal from the future. He's actually the global warming edition. The global warming Torkoal with Lilligant's obviously really good for the eruptions. And like After Me, Eruption, that kind of stuff. Dragonite's just like such a like solid like power hitter Pokemon. Just like Terranormal E-Speed, stuff like that. Iron Hands, I think, is kind of inarguably one of the better draft bonds right now. Because it gets Fake Out, it has amazing coverage, its bulk is absurd, you don't even have to Terra it to live a lot of stuff it really shouldn't be living. And it's very like it's pretty splashable overall. Like you obviously would prefer it in Trick Room, and this team has a good Trick Room mode with the Bronzong. And I think that's solid. One mon I really do like on this team quite a bit is the Sableye. I like having the manual weather as well as Quash on this team as well. So like when you don't want to like lead with Torkoal or switch Torkoal in, I think that having that Sableye option is really, really good. And I think that Quash, especially with Iron Hands and Torkoal and things like that, could really be nasty for some teams. Gastrodon, I feel like, is kind of a necessary Pokemon here. Storm Drain, basically. It's a good kind of defensive piece that kind of glues it all together. Florges is a fun Pokemon. Kind of the best thing, the most fun thing it gets is the symbiosis stuff, which this team can kind of take advantage of with Iron Hands, and that's about it, but it's cool. But Florges in of itself, though, too, is a specially defensive tank on a Pokemon on a team that is mostly physically defensively oriented. Persian gives you fast fake out, a lot of fast support as well. So I think overall the team works, right? I think like at a base level, this team works. It's a Sunroom team, pretty much first and foremost, and it's got good attackers within that. I think kind of some of the issues of it, kind of the best mons on the team are the physical ones. Like most of your output is going to be physical, and that definitely can hurt you a bit, right? Where you have a team where your best attackers are the Iron Hands and the Dragonite and the Bronzong clicking body press, that kind of stuff. And Gastrodon and Gastrodon, Torkoal, Florges, Lilligant are all fine, but none of their special attacks really like hit a big number that you would want them to, other than Florges. So I do think that is one thing that this team can potentially run into. This team also can definitely struggle if it isn't able to get its modes going. Like if you're going for the Trick Room mode with the Bronzong, or you're going for even honestly potentially Tailwind with Dragonite, that kind of stuff, you do struggle if the opponent can stop whatever you're doing, right? If you aren't able to get the TR up, if you aren't able to get that advantage, I do think this team can get kind of bowled down a little bit. Overall, though, I think it's solid. I think all the mons are pretty good. I think it kind of cohesively works together fine. There is a lot of shared weaknesses between a lot of Pokemon that also is a bit worrying, but that's kind of just comes with the Sunroom territory, So overall, like pretty good team. It'll be functional for the season. I don't super have any like transaction recommendations because I think that the team kind of needs everything it has to an extent. It's just that it wants more things than it currently has. So that's all I got. What do you got for me, Charles or Joey?
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay. I just want to say something I really, really enjoy about the team. One thing, my favorite thing about this team is that just it has so much like raw ability to just enable each other. Like these Pokemon enable each other so stinking well. Like I mean, you even want to get the Trick Room up. Iron Hands is great for fake out and just helping Bronzong get the Trick Room up, and then it obviously goes from there. And there's also the things with the Quash, or so you do lose. Let's say you do lose all these speed stuff going on with that. You have Dragonite with extreme speed. You turn normal extreme speed. And I think that just there's a lot of merit in that. And another thing, I guess a bit of a smaller thing I like is that, you have, not only do you have the Sableye with Fake Out, but you have the Persian and the Iron Hands. So really, Sableye doesn't really have to run Fake Out much. And that's really, really big on Sableye with like bad Fort Move Slot Syndrome, since that thing has so many useful attacks. And being able to free up that Pokemon a lot more is really nice. And then, of course, there's just the things already mentioned, like the Gashon, Storm Drain, such and such. But yeah, I think this team looks really fun. I think it looks very fun. And I'll pass it on to Joey.
Yeah, I agree that it looks very fun. I think that it actually is one of the most interesting teams in the draft. I mean, personally, I hate this team in the best possible way. Is the only way I can really describe it because it's going to be such a menace to deal with and to prep for. Everything about it is just like, haha, you thought, I don't know. One thing that's worth mentioning, I think, is Chiyu was actually on this team. Dragonite was taken over the Chiyu, which I guess I understand why. I feel like Chiyu actually made this team a little better. But it's still on the board, so you could swap it if you wanted to.
I think you just like Chiyu a lot.
I do. I really like Chiyu, man. It's a great fish. It's an excellent fish.
I definitely can see this team without Chiyu.
Yeah, no, I get that. I don't know. I would like to see a better Tailwind option here. Well, I don't know. When I'm looking at this team, I don't see why it would really want to go into Tailwind all that much. I guess Trick Room is just really what it would be best at. So perhaps not. Maybe my feedback there is meaningless, and we can move on.
All right. So next we got Jaden. And Joey, would you like to start?
Yeah. So with Jaden's team here, we've got Gudra Hisui, Rillaboom, Iron Jugs, Arcanine, Sylveon, Basculegion Female, Rabska, Toxicroak, Rotom, just base Rotom, Sandaconda, and Shroodle. Okay, so with this team, I have some conflicting thoughts on it, just because I really like it, and I think that it has very strong type diversity. And I mean, Gudra Hisui is just a wall, so I really think that it's going to be super valuable on this team. I believe that it's going to require a lot of skillful play from the opponent to get around the synergistic combos here. I think that Rillaboom is going to be really useful. I'm not sure how useful quite without the Grassy Glide or the high horsepower, because it did lose those things. It's still, I think, a solid option for sure. I'm not. I don't know how useful it's going to be without that priority or the strong ground coverage. But still, I mean, this team has really good offensive options in combination with its high bulk. That's offered, just Rillaboom stats are relatively bulky. You've got Iron Jugulus, who's relatively bulky. You've got Rabska, who's relatively bulky. Sandaconda, even on the defensive, on the physical side, and then of course the Gudra here. And all of it is just complemented by a strong offense. So I think that having both of those things together, this is a really good bulky offense team for both Tailwind and Trick Room. I mean, we talk a lot about the Tailwind and the Trick Room, but this team very, very obviously has access to both of those things with the Iron Jugs and the Rabska. So I feel like it's got a lot of synergy and has potency within its options that's going to be very difficult for its opponents to prep against. However, I think the main weakness of this team is that it doesn't feel as flexible as it could have been, or as other teams in the format. Like when we think back to Spooks' team, with just the wide variety of what it could do, like the Iron Valiant and the Ursaluna and Rotom Heat and all that stuff. It just had so many options. Whereas this team, it doesn't have a lot of options. The options that it has are very strong, but it's mostly going to be doing the same things each week, from what I can see in just this overview. And I think that that's kind of the main weakness of it. And it might have some trouble dealing with very hyper offensive blitz teams. Even though it has a lot of bulk on it, if the prep is made to just really dominate specific Pokemon, I think that it's kind of going to crumple under hyper offense teams. Yeah, I don't know. I also don't know how much Basculegion here is doing, especially as a T2 pick. I don't like the water or the ghost type doesn't seem as valuable here. And I think that you could easily add some flexibility to this team by picking up like Zoroark, the Hisuian one, in T2. I think that would just offer more options, even with that one trade, to not always run here's my super slow Trick Room mode, and here's my fast Tailwind mode. That's just what I see in this team. Any thoughts to add there, Charles or Ryan?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said. I really do. My favorite thing about this team is that, I mean, well, yeah, like I do see that there's a lot of it is not a whole lot of room to be super creative and be super flexible with the team. This team does get value out of every single Pokemon that's in here. Like, I mean, the tier 4s here are amazing. Like Sandaconda, I'm a big believer in Sandaconda. I have it in
Yeah.
PDPL right now. I love that Pokemon so much, and it's just having that thing with Iron Dragulus enables it so much, makes it so good. And then there's the Shroodle, which I mean, not only does it have Unburden, so it can function with the Rillaboom, but it can also set like things like Rain Dance for to maybe increase the value of the Basculegion here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I believe does Hisuian Gudra get no, never mind. I was thinking to get hydration, but I don't think this one does get hydration.
It gets gooey and shell armor and
Sap
Zipper.
Okay, yeah, so it did lose hydration, but I mean that's not a huge thing, but yeah, I think this team definitely like it's definitely one of those teams you look at and it's like, oh my god, like this has so many strong options. I mean, and just like the synergies and like type synergies and switching potential. Yeah, I think this team, while not super flexible, you do know what this team wants to do. I think it does have a lot of room to be versatile in what it brings and what you see, just in what it is.
See,
like,
and I'd actually argue that actually is where a lot of the flexibility for this team comes from. Is I've actually quite liked this team because it feels a lot less locked into a specific 6 on a given week. Like a lot of teams like functionally have kind of their 6 Pokemon and they can kind of like swap maybe like 1 or 2 in, like that's how a lot of teams are constructed. I like that this team, like I genuinely could see any combination of 6 Pokemon coming pretty much and it making sense and working fine for like a matchup. I feel like you can really tailor this team for a matchup. I'm definitely biased. This team has a lot of like my favorite mons I've used in Gen 9 so far, particularly the Iron Jug Sylveon. I mean, that's bread and butter right there. I love that. I think obviously the Disquake mode is nice. I think the terrain mode too. One thing that actually I think could be really interesting would be like Rillaboom Gudra, and you just give the Grassy Seed to the Gudra. And then it's like, okay, cool, kill this, because
write that down.
Yeah, write that down. So there's definitely some cool kind of stuff like that. I do think one thing to watch out for with this team, though, being that Rillaboom's kind of one of the top mons. The team's overall reasonably physical. It's not like all like obviously Arcanine, Basculegion are both run mixed a lot of the time. Rillaboom, Gudra, that kind of stuff. But I do think people will be running opposing Grassing Seed into this team a lot, because it kind of just looks like a decent option for some of its mons. So that's kind of something to look out for. And I do think Basculegion does definitely serve a purpose on this team, even if solely to be a really good Rillaboom Arcanine pivot. Like I think it's really good in that role. And I think that it's going to serve that role pretty well. And adaptability is just a dumb ability, everybody. Yeah, I overall quite like this team. I think my only real, like, it's not even like a huge criticism, just that the Rabsca Sylveon TR mode, to me, is a little, just a hair underdeveloped. Like, just a hair. Like, I think it's okay, but I would love a little bit extra there. Overall, though, really nice team. Really good job to Jaden. This is a team I would personally play with. I guarantee you that.
All right, and with that, let's go ahead and move on to number 5. All right, and I'll be starting this one for Otto. And Otto's team is Thundurus Incarnate, Enamorous Incarnate, Garchomp, Hisuian Typhlosion, Hisuian Lilligant, Teleon, Gothorita, Kanto Tauros, Mabostiff, and then Fortress and Glalie to round it out. So I think this team has a lot of very powerful, like, and I think that's like the key word for this team is just powerful things that it can do. Like, I mean, just look at the first two, like the two genies there, got the just eerie impulse into that thing, and now it's a monster, like poof, just like that. And yeah, and it's also just got both of those Pokemon also just offer great speed control. They work very well next to Garchomp here, so you can Disquake, you just spam Earthquake next to them all you want, and they're supporting each other very well. And then of course you got the Typhlosion, which also functions very well with the two genies here, in that you just click Tailwind or you just click Thunderwave on something, and now you're fast enough to click a huge Eruption, and get that off. And also Frisk is very nice. And then Thunderous, I believe, gets the Sunny Day now, so that makes Assume Lilligant really good, and that thing is really strong and powerful. And then Inteleon is just a strong water type. I'm actually really, really big believer that this Pokemon is really good, especially since Scald's gone. Snipe Shot is just such a huge tool to have on the team. And here you got the Gothorita, which is just annoying. It's a Trick Room. Double Intimidate, which is always fun. And then the last two here just kind of like round out some weaknesses and also just give a few more options to the team. But yeah, overall, I think this team is very, like I said, powerful. The most glaring weakness of this team is that, I mean, you look at all the 3 tier 1s, they're all very weak to ice. And I know this is something, I believe this is something that got called out in like a chat. I think Otto himself called this out.
It's me. I said that.
And yeah, there are some answers ice. I mean, you do got that Typhlosion and I guess Fortress too. But overall, like, that's just a very big thing.
Freeze dry, baby. Yep, Sean, come on out. Do the things so that Joey can't say it's a bad fit.
I honestly, Ryan, I think I'm just going to pass it on to you because I think you'll be able to explain this a lot better than I will here. So
yeah, I think that, don't get me wrong, Terra exists this gen, right? Like, you can Terra the Garchomp, you can Terra the Enamorous, you can Terra the Thunderous. It's also risky to just Icy Wind all of these Pokemon. It's not a good idea to just Icy Wind that stuff. I think that overall it works pretty well. But definitely, to me, I looked at this team and my first thought was like, oh god, you can only Terra one Pokemon, and Freeze Dry goes crazy. Now, there's not a lot of Pokemon that get Freeze Dry, and in fact, Otto has one of them in the Glalie, so that's good. But I do think that, generally speaking, like, ice type, like ice water coverage does look pretty good into this team. And I do think that's something that Otto's definitely going to have to play a little carefully around at times. And have we mentioned the Sun mode yet?
I briefly touched on it.
Yeah, just a little bit. But I actually quite like the Sun mode, and I do think that helps out a lot with that. I think the Thunderous Eye just Prankster Sunny Daying, and then the Typhlosion clicking, boosted eruptions, the Lilligant Hisui in Sun is such a crazy Pokemon. Victory Dance, along with just like, it gets Solar Blade, I'm pretty sure, so it can just like Solar Blade CC in Sun and just kill everything. So like, definitely, I definitely think that, like, from a mode and power perspective, this team's like super, super, super solid. I do think that there is ways to crack it, though. It's just going to be really hard to consistently. I'd also like to compliment this team on value. I think that, like, every Pokemon on this team is like pretty great value in its given tier. Like, there's not a single Pokemon here that isn't really good for how much it costs. And I do see that Tauros anchor point. That'll be funny one week, Otto. Haha. Anyway, that's pretty much my thoughts. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I really don't think that the ice weakness is going to be that much of a problem for this team. Not just because of Terra, but because of the speed that it can offer. And I mean, if you tried to click Icy Wind into Thunderous Enamorous,
yeah. Like, guess what? Bad idea.
Yeah, so I don't know. You either have to pick, like, Freeze Dry. Okay, you get Freeze Dry, maybe Ice Beam or something like that. You hit one of them. Okay, well, the other one is now going to decimate the rest of you. So I don't know. And I'm not saying, every time it's going to lead Thunderous and Amorous, but I think that this team is absolutely nuts. It's so good, in my opinion, because of the flexibility that Thunderous and Enamorous offer, as well as the offensive power that you guys have already talked about, and the high value that was achieved out of basically all of the picks on this team, even the Fortress, which normally, Fortress you don't like to see because it's got that glaring fire weakness. But even the Fortress on this team offers a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but a good amount of value for being a tier 4. And with that said, in terms of like transaction ideas, I think that Fortress is probably the only one I would drop. Maybe I would throw out like I don't know, the Tauros K for like a Decidueye or something. That's off the top of my head, but I don't know. I just think that maybe having another option for Tailwind than just the Enamorous would be good, and Decidueye gets it, so that's what I was thinking of there. But I don't know. I really think that this team is amazing, so that's I don't have too much to say other than that.
Yeah, I guess just like one last thing to add, like this does look like a very auto team. This looks like pretty similar to things I've seen auto draft in the past, and he always does well with this sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, like I don't mean to like tie in like this isn't like me tying in the player to the ranking here, but like yeah, I think this will be a lot of fun to see used. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to number 4. And Ryan, take it away.
Okay, so here we've got Quick's team, and I'm very fond of this team. I think this is a cool comp. Kind of like very like standard draft comp, but I'll list the mons off real quick. We've got Urshifu, Lando T, Dragapult, Talonflame, Rotom Wash, Oranguru, Gardevoir, Berserker, Dragalge, Spidops, Ice-Q. Kind of similar. This is something I think was true for kind of all the top 5 teams to an extent, but I do think the value here is really good. Especially that tier 3. I think Gardevoir, Berserker, Dragalge, like, dude, like that's some crazy good value out of that tier. I think that all the mons also just cohesively work well together. This reminds me of a team that I would be likely to see on ladder, but not in a bad way. Talonflame, Rotom kind of stuff. Landorus T Rotom's your Disquake mode. Dragapult is fast. It can be supportive. It can be offensive. Honestly, I could see support Dragapult really popping off on this particular comp. But the fact that it is so fast and so versatile, you've got really good TR stuff as well. Both the Gardevoir and the Oranguru get Trick Room, so you have 2 options for a setter there. Combined with Berserker Dragalge, which I think in terms of low tier Trick Room mode, I mean, you can't get a lot better than that. That's just Tough Claws Berserker plus adaptability Dragalge just nukes everybody. You also have that, Belly Drum Ice-Q, I guess, if you want to do the Ice-Q shenanigans. I really wouldn't with this team because it's good enough on its own merits, but Oranguru can do some fun stuff too with Instruct on this team. There's a couple options for that. And then I think Urshifu is just like one of the best mons, period. The ability to just hit and crit through Protect is kind of crazy. And I think it's a mon that does need some support. And I think this team supports it really, really nicely. It's got naturally good like physical bulk, but having mons that can still help it tank some of those physical hits is really good. And then you combine that with the kind of tailwind so you can lead it in the back. You can like lead Talonflame and set the tailwind and get some big damage off. I think overall it's pretty solid. I do think my only real critique of the team is it does feel a bit more predictable than some other teams, like in part because it is kind of like what I consider like a more standard draft league team. I do think that like in game you're gonna have a pretty good sense of what Quick will be wanting to do on a turn. I do think it'll be hard to stop whatever that thing is because of the nature of the team, but I do think that there is a level of like understandability to this team. Like there's not like there's definitely some strong wild card potential with this, but I don't think like you look at this team and think about that kind of thing as much. Like this team will kind of almost work the best if it's run a little bit more standard, which isn't a bad thing. But I do think that is, while not a knock against the team, it's something I think the player should consider. I think Quick should really consider, how do I want to prep and build this team week to week so that people do have to deal with something that they don't expect a little bit. But I'll go ahead and pass it off to you guys.
Yeah, I feel like this team it's very strong, like you said, with especially like these top 3 here, the Urshifu, the Lando, and the Dragapult. You've got a lot of offensive pressure that you can put out. I do think that the team goes a little bit too far into the I'm going to click Earthquake next to other things in my team.
No, can't ever go far enough into that.
I don't know, man.
I love it. I love it.
I mean,
absolutely, the telepathy plus the Talonflame plus the Rotom Wash Levitate, that is so good. Do not change a goddamn thing.
I just think that it could have been without one of the Oranguru or Gardevoir in favor of something else. I don't know what it could have been to be better. I just think that maybe it leans a little bit too heavily into that. But I mean, clearly Ryan feels passionately the other way. So.
I'm very passionate about clicking really nonsense moves.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the fears I have for this team is, I've said it before for another team, but fairy type fairies into this team look pretty strong. I don't really see a good answer for them other than the Berserker, I guess, and that's just, I don't feel like it's enough. And I feel like, I mean, even the Dragalge is going to be weak to Fairy if it like Terra's over to the Dragon to get the extra Dragon boost or something like that. I don't know. It's just, I'm not. I'd like to see more coverage for that particular weakness, because once Urshifu and Dragapult, or Dragapult, I should say, go out from that, you're left with basically your Earthquake spam, which is pretty easy to prep for if you have the options on your team. So, at least in my opinion.
You don't understand. He took all the options.
Fair enough.
I'm kidding, of course, but
I know. Spite Ops, though, I gotta say, dude, I just, this would not be complete without me saying Spite Ops is trash. I can't with that mon, dude. It's so slow, so like it seems like it would be good to go in Trick Room, but all of its good moves are for like dropping speed. So why? It doesn't do anything. It's like
it gets counter. That's it. But it's fun.
I mean, I guess it's funny, but Ice Cube. I mean, Ice Cube isn't even the greatest pick on this team, but it is way better than the Spite Ops, because you're never gonna want to bring the Spite Ops to your Trick Room mode here with the Berserker and the Dragalge, because why would you want to make things go slower than you in Trick Room?
You know, you've got slots to fill on a team. Sometimes it'd be like that.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess
that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I guess I'll just throw in a few quick thoughts. I do agree with what you said about the Gardevoir Neoring Guru. I think there might be more value to be gained out of like dropping one of those and adding something else. And I know, Ryan, you're gonna say, no, you got to have as much Earthquake spam as you can next to these things. Hear me out. Terra Flying Urshifu. Fixed. Problem
it's
solved.
heard.
Problem
I think it's
solved.
a great idea.
Yep, there you go. No. In all seriousness, yeah, I think you guys really nailed this one on the head, though. Not much to add for me. And I think I'm ready to move on if you guys are.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Right, let's go. Number 3. And Joey, would you like to start?
Yeah, so this is Wakeman's team. We've got the Basculegion male, Chien-Pao, Thunderous T, Murkrow, Breloom, Farigiraf, Tinkaton, Donphan, Venomoth, Pyropar, Pyroar, Lycanroc, Midnight. So, first off, I think that this team is probably my favorite team other than my own. I'm really excited to see what the Basculegion can do, and I mean, I just been really enjoying the funny calcs that Wakeman's been posting, you know, with the personally I just meme that he's been kind of sticking to. I think it's really interesting to see what Basculegion can do in calcs, even when they're silly ones. And I think that this team really benefits a lot from having the only other Prankster Tailwind option in the format than Tornadus. So a lot of teams are going to have a hard time stopping this Chien-Pao Basculegion combo if he gets it in the right position, especially with the Thunderous here as kind of like this flexible support piece that really just ties the rest of the options across the tiers together, along with like the Breloom. I mean, Ryan, I know that you love Breloom, but when I used it in a different league, I found it to be just super flexible as I'm on. Week to week, I was bringing completely different sets on it, and it all worked. So, in combination with just the raw amount of versatility that this team has with the Thunderous and the Murkrow and the Breloom and even the Tinkaton, it's going to be a really oppressive team that can utilize those unique options really nicely. I think that the team also has really quick startup time that is going to kind of steamroll a lot of leads right off the bat, especially if people aren't prepared for that kind of offense, or if they underestimate the Basculegion, especially next to the Chien-Pao, for example. And I think it also covers really nicely for the Trick Room option that opponents could bring along with it. I don't see a super strong Trick Room mode within the team, but I think that it has a good option with Donphan, if it needs to go slow and hit something with ground moves or something like that. It has the Farigiraf, of course, to set it up if it wants to on its own. Tinkaton, just these bulky mons that can kind of outlast the Trick Room really nicely as well, just to fit into covering for that potential weakness, which I'm not even sure is really a weakness, to be honest. And I don't know. I guess that in terms of actual weaknesses, I think that the special attack side of this team is a little bit lacking. And it has its own overlapping weaknesses to like rock and ground that could be really problematic for the team if they're not taken out quickly enough. And then also Intimidate looks really solid into this team, and that might be a little bit tricky. But other than that, I mean, that's really all I can think of for weaknesses for it. And in terms of some potential transaction ideas here, though, I think that there's really nothing I would change other than maybe nitpicking the Lycanroc down in the T4. You probably could get more value out of like Gumshoos to fit into the Trick Room if you wanted to set it yourself, or perhaps like Phalanx for a Defiant Mon to go against the Intimidate, the threat of Intimidate that I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, I mean, even if you don't swap that, I think that this team is going to be absolutely amazing to play and going to be really tough to prep against. But I'll go ahead and pass it off to you guys.
I'll take over. I know Wakeman very well. I know his teams very well. I've seen a lot of them. This is a Wakeman team. This is I'm gonna go Burr, and if you can't stop me, I'm gonna run you over. Yes, very hyper offense, and there is that weakness that does exist for the Trick Room here, but like you have Tinkaton, and the only way to stop Tinkaton fake out is Covert Cloak, which is really, really good. And then if they have Covert Cloak, you have Breloom. So unless your Trick Room setter was like forced to tear it to grass, or it is just a grass type, like it's. And then in other words, there's the taunt on like half of these things, I think. So like while it does have that Trick Room weakness, it is very, very good at denying it, and I think that's got a lot of merit in it. And yeah, I will say another thing I will say is this team does seem a little soft to Fairy. I can't remember if you had mentioned that or not, but I mean, it does have the Tinkaton, which is very good into that sort of thing. Overall, Tinkaton's just really, really nice here. But yeah, this is a Wakeman team. Wakeman will have fun with this. I know he's been wanting to use Basculegion for a long time, and he's gonna get his chance, and he's gonna do well with it. And Ryan, do you got any thoughts?
Okay, I have two things to announce. First off, for those of you who heard like crashing and me saying "oh" into the microphone, I've never had my desk chair fucking break while recording. I guess I need to buy a new one. That was fun. I'm on my knees right now. Anyway, so that's thing number one. Sorry, Wakeman, this is going on your slide. Thing number two, shout out to Wakeman for pinging me when he picked Breloom. Shit made me laugh really hard. Anyway, I do unironically quite like this team, though. I think that like the overall composition is really solid. I mean, that rainbow is just stupid looking. I think the Chien-Pao also just helps a lot with the fact that the team is so physical. I think that like being able to come in and be like, this now gets the kill, even with like lowered stats and things like that, is going to really help this team out. I think the type cores are really well thought out. He also has another mon that's one of my favorites, Frigoraph. I mean, it's I think Wakeman is very much in the camp of like the best way to beat Trick Room is to deny Trick Room. And while we're not taking coach playstyle into this, I do think that methodology generally can work if you build it right, and he did this time. I think that like generally speaking, a lot of coaches like will be mad because it's like, oh, you talked about my Trick Room mode or lack of one, and it's like, right, but if you can stall Trick Room effectively or you have an answer for it, then it's a non-issue, which like this team definitely does have that answer, which I think is good. I also just think that like broadly speaking, like Frigoraph or Murkrow is actually kind of a nasty lead because you can just run because you can actually run Eviolite on Murkrow if you want to. Overall, I really like it. Shout out for Breloom. That makes this my favorite team by default, even regardless if I rated it in PRs. So I wish Wake the best of luck using my boy. I'm going to get a replacement chair while we move on to rank 2.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. And this one's going to be Joshi, and I will be starting this one. So Joshi has Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Mousehold, Landorus Eye, Kilowattrel, Mimikyu, Armorogue, Orthworm, Sarina, Zoroark, Creagonal, and Impidimp. And I really, really like this team. I'm going to... Let's see, how do I want to like structure this? I think I want to talk about this Urshifu and Mousehold, but I want to save that for last. So I guess this team is very, very good with going like quickly. Like for one, I think that the Kilowattrel Landers here, that's insane. I mean, yeah, it's weak to ice, but like you got like Armorogue and also the Urshifu. So I don't think that's like much of an issue, but that much just gonna go really good. Really strong Disquake or Sheer Force Earth Power Discharge, whatever. I don't know. And it also has just like the combo with like the Orthworm, you can set Shed Tail, and you get priority denial, if I can speak. Jeez. And then Zoroark obviously adds a lot of really cool aspects to this team. And you do have the Mimikyu and the Armorogue here to set Trick Room. You can't really take much advantage of Trick Room, which I do think is probably the biggest issue of this team. But yeah, I really just want to talk about this Urshifu and Mousehold right now. Like, in my opinion, I think the combo of these two in a draft setting, like for me personally, seeing those two, I immediately was like, okay, this team probably ranks top 5 for me. Because like one thing we didn't really mention about these Urshifus is that they get Swords Dance now. And Swords Dance plus confirmed crit moves is really, really, really good. And one thing we had talked about with Quick's team is that like there's not the greatest support to really help the Urshifu get going, but this one has Mousehold with Friend Guard and Follow Me, and also Super Fang. Let's throw that one out there too. And it's just absurd. Like this thing can kind of just set Swords Dance, Terra Water, and you're dead to Rapid Strike. And there's not a lot that's going to be able to switch in or deal with that. Like, you can't even really intimidate it. You can't even really burn it. You can't set screens in front of it. Like, and you can't protect in front of it. Like, that's, like, that combo alone is just so ridiculous and so insane. And I love it. Now, like I said before, this team, if Trick Room goes up against this team, it's probably going to struggle, especially when there's a really good setter in the other hand. So if I would make any like transaction ideas, I would say something to help Trick Room, something with a bit more of a slow speed tier. I think will really help you out a lot, and I think this team would be just incredible if it had that. But yeah, those are my big thoughts. I'll let you guys continue with it.
Yeah, I actually have a couple things to add here because, first of all, I think that I want to reiterate that it can't be understated how potent redirection next to Protect Immune, Sash and different auto crits can be. I mean, that rapid strikes here with the surging strikes hitting multiple times. It doesn't even care if you have the focus sash on you. You can't even deal with focus sash. There's nothing that will be able to stop that other than just resisting it. And even then, with the sword stance, I didn't actually know that the sword stance was added to Urshifu
Yeah,
this gen.
because
So
fair and balanced.
yeah, no, I mean with sword stance being set up next to the mouse hold too, like I'm not sure anything's gonna live to that. Well, I would be very impressed. I want to see some calcs, but just to add more to this particular team and what I think on it. I do definitely agree that the trick room mode here is lacking. I think that Orth Room on its own isn't enough for it, but um, because of how valuable mouse hold is here, I think that if it goes down too early, this team is in a vulnerable spot. Um, so teams that will outspeed and then just blow up the mouse hold and can somehow resist living or resist being one shot by the Urshifu, then I think that might be a little bit tough um,
Yeah.
for this team. But I do want to say that Mimikyu on this team feels a little bit weird to me. Mostly just because I don't feel like it has a very well defined role. I mean, mostly you see like Will-O-Wisp and Trick Room, and then maybe like a Shadow Snake or something on the Mimikyu. But and I know that Disguise is good and it's a good pick overall, especially without like Max from last gen. Um, I don't know. I just think that this team probably could get a lot of value out of swapping the Mimikyu over to like Indeedee, the male, Indeedee male, because it would boost the Arma with the expanding force option in that, and it would still have Trick Room, as like a denial piece if it wanted to do that or set it itself for some reason, um, and I think that Psychic Terrain would actually do wonders for this team because if you don't want to run like a Covert Cloak or something on mouse hold, um, you could just stop. You can put up Psychic. You could have like your four could be mouse hold Urshifu and then Indeedee and Arma in the back or something, and then you could swap those around. And I feel like those four right there would just be really difficult to deal with. But I don't know. I haven't really thought that out too much. I think that that is one swap that I would do, especially because Psychic Terrain would also let you drop the Serena because Serena you wouldn't need like the Queenly Majesty anymore, and you could pick up something that gives you a little bit better speed control than just the Kilowattrel, because Kilowattrel gets the Tailwind, but in my experience using it, kind of just sets Tailwind and then dies. Doesn't really. It's not as good as I feel like other people say it is. Maybe that's a hot take, but yeah, I feel like getting like Haunter or Frostlass with faster Icy Winds and keeping Will-O-Wisp that you would lose from dropping the Mimikyu in favor of Indeedee. I just think that getting like a Indeedee for Mimikyu and Frostlass for Serena would be a good like swap to make this team just even more flexible. Anything else to add there, Ryan?
Yeah, have we discussed the Disquake mode yet? I did have to leave briefly, so I just want to make sure we covered that. Okay, good.
Loosely, yeah.
Because Lando, obviously a lot of people think of it as a special attacker because ooh, sheer force, earth power, but like it can do other stuff. I do really quite like this team. I don't remember exactly where I put it, but I know I put it in top 3. I think that like it's just got really good value across the board. I think the modes it has are kind of nuts. I do like the Lando Eye next to Orthworm too. I think that could be really, really fun. I don't know how I feel about the TR denial. I've always been really fond of Mimikyu in draft. I think it's a more flexible piece than people give it credit for. It's just a really tough to deal with like support offensive Pokemon in a way that like very few other Pokemon can emulate. I think it's kind of a unique pick. I do like it on this team, but I definitely do see the argument for the Indeedee. So I definitely think that's something Josh you could consider, even if I think Mimikyu's talents here could be useful. But yeah, I do really just like this team. I think that it's gonna I think it's going to just pop off really hard most of the time. I think it's just got a lot of really cool options. I think a lot of stuff works together really nicely on the team, and I am excited to see it played.
All right, and I guess last but most certainly not least, here you go. And Brian, would you like to start?
Yeah. Okay. So our first place overall, according to average of coach rankings, is Joey. So Joey's team has Torn Eye, Great Tusk, Goldango. That's pretty much it. And then it also has this like Pachirisu, Hatterene, Rotom-Mow, Bisharp, Crabominable, Greninja, Stantler, and Carbink. Really, I was making kind of a joke there, but like genuinely, like the tier ones kind of make the team here a little bit. I think Torn, Great Tuskle Dango is just that is just so much output in a pair of three Pokemon. And there's some nice synergies there as well, defensively, offensively. I think those two work really well together, and I think they both pair really nicely with the Torn. You got Pachirisu here. Pachirisu is pretty good redirection for this team. I think that Pachi can redirect for Goldengo if it'd like to, but most often it'll redirect for kind of the Torn on this team, or maybe I guess the Greninja with the Volt Absorb. But Pachi here is solid support piece. Hat gives you Trick Room kind of as an option, along with your Stantler and Carbink that also set TR. I think that you're more so using Hatterene as an offensive TR piece, which I actually quite like. I think a lot of people sleep on how much output a Hatterene can have. And I like too that Hat bounces status as well, which your team generally is fairly difficult to status, which is something that I think is really nice, considering how much Prankster is available and how many Pokemon get Spore and all those kind of moves this gen. I think that's going to be pretty nice for you. You got Rotom-Mow, that gives you Disquake. That's just, Great Tusk, Rotom-Mow, Disquake. Bisharp as a pick. I mean, for tier 3, it's definitely strong value. I think Bisharp obviously was used back in the days before it had an evolution too. It's definitely one of the weirder Pokemon to use on a week-to-week basic. I like the Defiant here though, especially for like the Torn Eye, like that I think can give some nice deterrent to some stuff, and the Steel typing's good here. Crabominable's a really good Trick Room Pokemon. like way better than it has any right to be Trick Room Pokemon. And I think it's going to pair nicely with that Trick Room mode. Greninja's definitely in Greninja. I'm very curious to see how it does this gen. It has Battle Bond and Torrent. Its move pool is great. It did lose Map Block though. And the other thing is that Gren just like as a mon seems like its attacking stats and defensive stats are not quite what you'd want them to be. So I'm really curious to see how it works. I think Stantler's just awesome. You get that Intimidate support, you get that Trick Room, you can do the skill swap Intimidate, get yourself Defiant stuff. Like people used to meme back in the day. That was fun. And then Carbink's just a nice support piece. I think here you have a team that you can use pretty nicely top to bottom. I think it works overall. There's a couple defensive things with the team I'm not super fond of. I think that outside of Rotom-Mow, Earthquake Rock Slide does look good into like this entire team, and I do worry about some stuff like that. Well, actually, also scratch that. Great Tusk obviously tanks those kind of hits pretty nicely too. But overall, though, I think this is a very, very nicely constructed team with a lot of options and a lot of power to it. It kind of is it can kind of go burr in multiple ways in a nice way, but it doesn't lose any of that pivoting potential that I think some teams when they go this route kind of can tend to lose a little bit. Those are my thoughts.
All right, and I guess I'll continue before let you speak, Joey, here on your own team. Yeah, this team just has something for everything. It's really good. I think whatever you see, you're probably gonna have some sort of answer that can stop it. I will say I think the big way people are gonna stop this is like with specific Pokemon and like let's see if I can like kind of like explain like what I mean by that. So like okay, so like something here like a lot of your physical damage is coming out of fighting moves. So if someone can recognize that and say, hey, I have something that's like really good with this, you got something like, but like that's so like specific ways to like really like check and counter this team that like It's pretty good. I don't even know if I'm explaining this well. I'm just rambling at this moment, but I like the team. Like that's all I gotta say. Uh, Not a whole lot of criticism. Not a whole lot of constructive criticism. I'd have. It's good.
Thanks. I think that what's interesting to me is that the community ranked this one, my team, as number one. I was not expecting that, to be quite honest. I felt like there were several other teams in this division that um, actually felt more dominant than mine. And I don't want to talk too much about the weaknesses that I see with my own team, but in the spirit of fairness, I think that I do agree with what Ryan was saying about like the weaknesses that it has. Rock Slide and Earthquake, it does look pretty good into the team. I think that what that really means, though, effectively for me, is it's just going to be difficult for me to pick what I want to Terra on from week to week. It's going to depend a lot on what the matchups are, and I think that that's going to be my biggest challenge using this particular team. Is just what am I going to Terra? You know, which because I feel like a lot of things want to use Terra. You know, whether it's the Goldango to be more defensive oriented, or even the Great Tusk to have that defense. Or if I wanted to run some shenanigans that I don't want to talk too much about. I don't know. I just think that it's going to be difficult for me to pick just one thing each game that I dedicate that Terra, per set. Best 2 of 3 or whatever. And the only other thing I wanted to add here is that I think that Pachi is really underrated. It's obvious. I mean, it's tier 2 here, and obviously a lot of people recognize that it's good. But I think that a lot of people underestimate just how bulky it is. I mean, you build it. You don't even have to build it max defense, and that thing can take an Earthquake from a Garchomp. You know, um, especially with like a Shuka Berry, you put a Shuka on it, and you're covering for literally anything that you can throw at the Pachi. And I feel like having that extra bulk on this team in particular, especially on the redirection option, just makes it a lot more flexible. And I can do some flexible setup options, and I like that. I like that about my team. Yeah, that's all.
All right.
All right. And with that, here is the final summary.
Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, see ya.